Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. I believe that Netflix is going to get a giant lump of coal in their stocking this Christmas season, and I don't think it's the kind of surprise that you want, especially when you've approached a large organization like Warner Bros. Discovery with what you think is a fair offer for what they have, which is kind of what Netflix did, except they did it knowing full well there was some competition out there who had been making offers for quite some time and would continue to do so because their level of interest was pretty peaked at acquiring this massive property and everything associated with it. So when it came to what recently happened, Netflix making an offer that was immediately accepted by the folks over at Warner Bros. Discovery, despite the fact that it wasn't the best and final offer of anybody, there was going to be some problems. I think there's some fiduciary issues here, and I think those will come into play. And I think that the major players are going to be looking at some of those insurance costs with a lot of scrutiny going forward, and whether or not Warner Bros. Discovery has to cough up money to Netflix for not being able to follow through on a deal that they greenlit. I think that's more and more likely. So let's take a look at this story from the perspective of Paramount's SEC filing that really does expose just how much corrupt behavior was coming from someone like David Zaslav. Strong statement, I know, but hey, there's evidence, so here we go. Now, before we get started with this particular Christmas surprise, we have this story coming out of That Park Place, a very well-researched and very well-informed story, as a matter of fact, with a lot of inside information. You see, Paramount SEC's filing shows that Warner Bros. Discovery board actually ignored a superior $30 per share offer to favor Netflix, which is a major no-no when it comes to fiduciary duty. In fact, it really can expose these officers to a lot of big trouble going forward, and the consequences of which could be long-lasting fines and penalties that no one will be able to overcome. This is written on December 9th by Marvin Montanaro and is, the centerpiece for what I'm going to call a lump of coal in Netflix's stocking. A newly released Paramount SEC filing regarding the hostile takeover tender offer for Warner Bros. Discovery has ignited a firestorm around Warner Bros. Discovery's handling of its proposed sale to Netflix, and according to the document Paramount submitted, an improved $30 per share all-cash offer on December 4th, an offer specifically crafted to address every concern Warner Bros. Discovery had previously raised. But the filing alleges something extraordinary. Warner Bros. Discovery board never responded. Not a counter, not a question, not even a courtesy acknowledgement that they received said offer. Instead, by the very next morning, Warner Bros. Discovery announced it had reached an agreement with Netflix. This is kind of a major no-no. You don't want to do something like this if you have a better offer, because your first obligation is to the shareholders who would stand to benefit from more money in their pocket. And that's basically what this deal was. A lot more money in a cash offer directly in shareholders' pockets. And this plays into a lot of major corporations' back pockets when you consider the institutional investors like BlackRock and Vanguard, when you consider the investors like AT&T, who have a major share of what Warner Brothers is set to become in the future, let alone everyday investors like you and I on the retail side of the equation. So for shareholders, this sequence isn't just eyebrow raising, it cuts straight to the heart of corporate governance. When a board receives a financially superior offer, one with higher cash value, stronger certainty, and fully committed financing, and chooses not to engage? What does that say about the integrity of the sale process? Well, I would say it's corrupted. And maybe so are the officers who are running this particular side of the negotiations. And mind you, this was an entity, a company, that was never up on the market. They started to just receive offers from interested parties because they were that vulnerable. And it was pretty evident, because their stock price was so much lowered than it should be, that, well, they would probably accept it, and so would the shareholders, especially if approached directly. But according to Paramount's SEC filing, it suggests something deeply concerning for Warner Bros. Discovery shareholders. You see, the timeline raises serious questions. The filing's timeline, shown on page 10 of these documents, lays out the events in stark detail. Paramount's upgraded offer was delivered on September 4th. It resolved the very issues that Warner Bros. Discovery had claimed were obstacles to a deal, including the increased value. It also clarified financing, and it bolstered certainty of completion of a deal. According to this particular page, if we take a look at it, Warner Bros. Never responded to a superior and timely revised offer from Paramount that addressed all feedback. This is a big problem. And you can look through this article and find all of this evidence for yourself. Paramount did not receive a response to that offer, which is neglectful at best. The lack of engagement becomes even more dubious when paired with what happened next. The Netflix announcement arriving barely a day later, that speed strongly implied that Warner Bros. Discovery board had already made up his mind, and that Paramount's improved proposal was never going to be giving meaningful consideration, which is absolutely ridiculous in this position, especially if you're a shareholder. If this is all true, and it seems to be, at least from outside observation, and these specific filings, which again have legal liabilities tied to them if they have any falsehoods in there, shareholders were deprived of a legitimate competitive process. This is part of the broader conversation when it comes to corruption and how things seem to be being fixed, and there maybe needs to be some investigation in not only the board members' conduct and what they were willing to do, but perhaps even some of the institutional investors, like, well, the big investment funds, BlackRock and Vanguard, if not State Street and a few others who have minor holdings there, to understand what was going on in the background and were there political motivations. I know that sounds weird, but there very well may be. And the bigger part of the story is just this, and we talk about it quite often, not just on the Culture Casino channel, but also over on the That Park Place channel and WDW Pro, as well as over on Midnight's Edge and every other place that I've ever been. Fiduciary duties are plain not optional. They are absolutely required in this element and at this scale of business. So boards owe shareholders a duty to seek out and evaluate the best available deal, even if a board prefers one strategic partner over another. This is how we ended up with the acquisition of Twitter at the time by Elon Musk, despite the fact that they really didn't want to sell to him for political reasons. The board must still weigh competing offers on their merits, and it's pretty obvious that the merits of the offer coming from Paramount were much better for shareholders, and the certainty was nearly guaranteed. But Paramount's SEC filing paints a picture of a board sprinting toward Netflix while ignoring a materially stronger proposal, which is a huge no-no. Paramount's revised offer didn't raise the headline number. It provided clean, all-cash certainty. It came with a fully backstopped financing, including tens of billions already committed, and ready to go. And Paramount argues it carried significantly lower regulatory risk, which is something that you would have to assume they're pretty schooled in at this point since they recently acquired Paramount. I mean, that was a big deal for the Ellisons and their group of investors. So when a board rejects such an offer without dialogue, which is exactly what happened, when there's no comparison and without any kind of transparency or communication, this kind of question becomes unavoidable, which again in the story, as well crafted by Marvin, has broken it out. It kind of illustrates all of the concerns that I have with this deal, and well, many other people do as well. Was Warner Brothers Discovery's board acting in the best interests of shareholders, or simply the fastest interest of a preferred partner? And again, this would be purely for political reasoning, and that's a no-no in business. It's not even something that needs to be considered. I think Warner Brothers could be in big trouble, specifically David Zaslav and any of the controlling board members. This is no bueno and points to a preferred rapid payday for David Zaslav and many other members of the board. For Paramount's case, their offer was clearly better, something that you could probably read through the lines already in this video. But throughout the filing, Paramount lays out why it believed their offer was superior. It's $30 per share, all cash, a higher guaranteed payout, which is what you kind of want as a shareholder, faster regulatory approval, according to Paramount's analysis, which, as I said before, is probably fairly reliable at this point, understanding the environment in which they're already competing, and fully committed financing, including major institutional backing from even sovereign funds. And with the addition of Jared Kushner's entity, it really does make regulatory look like a breeze. Clear operational synergies were shown across multiple slides, and if you review this entire article, you'll probably come to the same conclusion. By comparison, the Netflix structure, which was $23.25 in cash and $4.50 in Netflix stock, which in my opinion had been recently devalued with a 10-for-1 split, there's an uncertain spin-off stake that was in play and was not guaranteed to equal or exceed Paramount's value. And yet, that's the deal Warner Brothers Discovery rushed to accept. Shareholders deserve to know whether they were informed. And in my not to be too humble opinion, they weren't. I don't believe that any of these people knew that they were being given short shrift, and they didn't get an opportunity to understand to what degree. One of the most striking parts of the Paramount SEC presentation is the section encouraging Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders to ask whether all options were presented to them, because I think the answer everybody knows. Of course not. Did the board review the improved offer? Which, again, how would we know? There was no communication. Did it weigh the financing? Did it assess regulatory risks? Did it examine value differences? Or did it just simply block Paramount from participating in the process? I think you and I and everyone else already know the answer. So ask yourself this question. Is this deal with Netflix in trouble? I think we already have the answer. Yes. Do we believe that perhaps David Zaslav and other board members at Warner Brothers Discovery have not just culpability and responsibility, but likely exposure when it comes to this particular deal and the lack of fiduciary duty that they delivered to shareholders? Well, of course, that's the biggest consideration. Will the SEC pursue fines and additional penalties to anybody that's involved in this short shrift, politically driven deal with Netflix? I would say it's almost assured at this point. And finally, do you believe that individual shareholders may seek legal remedy from Warner Brothers Discovery directly, or perhaps even more directly from the board members and those involved in this process? I think all of the options are open, and I think we are going to be looking at probably one of the biggest messes that was easily preventable by simply doing your job and keeping the politics out of the business. But hey, those are my thoughts. What are yours? In fact, I want to know them. So let me know your thoughts and any of the questions that you have in the comments section down below. Double check you're still subscribed to the channel, because a lot of people have been telling me they've been unsubscribed, and I've been seeing the numbers start to dwindle, courtesy of YouTube. Be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! For real.